What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 30. So I'm going to show you how the team is looking, thoughts on whether I should bring Salah in for a hit this week or save it till next week, plus future plans as well. And I'll also run through just how bad Game Week 29 was. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button to help me hit 400,000 subscribers. Otherwise, let's get into it. So I guess we've got to start with Game Week 29 and review the previous game week, just like we always do in these videos. Hopefully this is the last time I have to relive it, because let's be fair, for a lot of people, Game Week 29 was an absolute disaster. And I've played this game for, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years, something like that at this point. This might just be the worst game week I've ever had. Obviously, recency bias plays a part. I can't remember every game week I've ever had. But considering I played a chip, free hit, got 16 points, only one return in my entire 15-man squad, and that was Vitinho sitting third bench, and got a red arrow. I don't think I've had many worse game weeks than that. But it didn't feel that bad at the time. You know, sometimes on the weekend, you're tracking the matches, tracking the scores, watching games, whatever, and like a player that everyone owns does really well and you don't have them and your player blanks, that can feel really bad. This game week just didn't, because I don't feel like a lot of people did much better. Obviously, if you had like Menez or Gibbs White or Fulham defenders and players like that, you've done really well in Game Week 29. But that wasn't the majority of other FPL managers. So as much as that probably is the worst game week I've ever had, it certainly didn't feel like that. When I benched Foden for his hat-trick a few weeks ago, that felt much worse than using the free hit in Game Week 29. So I don't know if there's any point in going through all the players, but they all blanked. So Flecken 2 points, Doughty 1, Porro 1, Reguilon obviously got a -3 red card. That was super frustrating, because as soon as that happens, you know the clean sheet's unlikely, and I think they lost it like a minute or two later, so that's bad for Flecken as well. I also had Tony, so he's going to get fewer chances. So it wasn't just -3 for Reguilon, it also affected the points from my other players. My entire midfield got 2 points, so Bowen, Maddison, Elanga, so did Son, and I captained him. Watkins 2 points, Morris 2 points. It was just terrible, and I think out of all those players, the one that was a little bit frustrating maybe was Elanga, because he did have a couple of chances in that game against Luton to get points. And it just didn't happen. Like on another day, I might have gone for Gibbs White instead of him. I might have gone for Chris Wood instead of Morris. They are both players I looked at, but I didn't. So it doesn't really matter. I never looked at Menez, so I'm not going to pretend that I did. But Chris Wood, if I knew he was starting, I probably would have gone for him over Morris. And the bench was just as bad, right? Areola 3 points, Bailey 2, Toffolo 1. And like I said, it was just Vitinho 5 points, third bench, that got me anything. So I've said this already in videos like streams and stuff like that. Game Week 29 itself was an absolute disaster, but I don't think free hitting in Game Week 29 was bad strategy, and I would go back and do it every single time because it's enabled a lot for my team. So back in Game Week 25, when we had the double game week for Liverpool and Man City, I was able to sell Richarlison for De Bruyne and have triple Liverpool, triple Man City. And one of the moves that I did to enable that was Porro to Doughty the week before. Now, I'm not saying everything that free hit 29 has allowed has worked, because obviously Jota and Nunez did terrible, so did De Bruyne, etc. But obviously that's hindsight, right? If I told you I was going to have triple Man City attack for a double game week plus Jota, Bradley as well, and Nunez, you think that looked pretty good, right? So I had the 6 doublers then. Obviously, it meant that I could go in for Bournemouth in their double in 28. Zabani did well. Solanke scored as well. So I had 4 double game week players for 28. I had 11 players for game week 29. Because of the way the fixtures are falling, obviously there's a bit of luck there. I'm going to have 10 or 11 double game week players in game week 34 without a hit. And then I've still got my wild card left to wild card into potentially, if I want to, 15 double game week players. So that free hit in 29, in theory, I still think was a good move, despite how bad it did in game week 29. And even coming back into game week 30, and I'm going to show you my team in a minute, I think it stacks up quite well to compared to wildcarders in game week 30 and 31. And like I said, there's obviously a bit of luck there with the way the FA Cup results went. But I think free hit 29 was good. 6 doublers in 25, 4 doublers in 28, a full 11 in 29, 11 doublers probably in game week 34, and then 15 doublers in 37. I think that's pretty good. So free hit 29, I still stand by the fact it was a good idea to go for it. For my squad, your squad might have been different, but it didn't end up good. I'm glad it's over. Let's talk about Game Week 30. So I've known for a while now, off the back of free hit 29, my defence in Game Week 30 wasn't necessarily going to look the best, especially compared to someone that played through Game Week 29. They might have Spurs defenders against Luton at home, Villa defenders against Wolves at home, and of course anyone that wildcards this week should have a better defence, right? Your team's generally going to look better if you wildcard, but actually, I think my defence is now okay. It's not perfect by any means. I've got to play Gabriel against Man City away because on the bench it's Saliba against Man City away or Doughty against Spurs away, and he's currently flagged as well. So we're still waiting for an update on him. So playing Gabriel against, one of the best teams in the league, not perfect. But outside of that, I've got Neto and Zabani against Everton at home because obviously Bournemouth doubled in 28. I bought both of those players in and was able to free hit them out in 29. And then Connor Bradley against Brighton at home. Now, don't get me wrong, having to play double Bournemouth defence doesn't sound great when you say it out loud. Their defence is not exactly watertight. They've conceded a lot of goals recently. Senesi missing is not ideal either. But in isolation, having to play Neto or Zabani is not really the end of the world. And I was always expecting to lose a few points this week, especially in defence anyway. And I think going forward, especially in Game Week 31, things look a lot better because I've got Gabriel and Saliba against Luton at home, and hopefully Connor Bradley will still be playing, and he's got Sheffield United at home. After that, it gets a little bit trickier, but I'm only having to manage Game Weeks 30 to 34 now because obviously I'm dead ending. So I don't want to get rid of any of my Bournemouth players because they've got a double. My eventual plan, by the way, will be to not play Zabani in Game Week 34, but he's there as backup in case I need to. And obviously, Gabriel and Saliba have both got a double as well. And my strategy has to be dead end 34 and then wildcard out of it. Nothing else makes sense. So I think I've just got to take it on the chin this week that things aren't perfect. Hope that the damage is minimal. And obviously, things look better, for the next few game weeks. At least that's the plan. With Connor Bradley, of course, we're waiting for press conferences on Thursday and Friday for updates on players. But there's a report, or at least a tweet that came out yesterday, quoting Paul Joyce, who's a journalist that covers Liverpool, and it seems like Trent is now aiming to come back for the Man United game, which is in Game Week 32, which leaves a space for Bradley to play against Brighton this week, and obviously Sheffield United in Game Week 31 as well. That's not guaranteed because Gomez could play right back instead, but Bradley has started most games while Trent has been out, but he didn't start the FA Cup game against Man United, so that has worried me a little bit. But obviously Robertson as well is a knock-on effect to the other players because he picked up an injury during international break. Now, we don't yet know how long he's out for, but if he's going to miss 1 or 2 games, that would mean that Tsimikas or Gomez would play left-back. And I don't think it's a guarantee that Tsimikas plays, in which case Bradley has that right-back spot nailed down. So I just think for the differential he is, there's no point in me overthinking the potential for Gomez to play right back. I just got to play Bradley this week because ultimately I don't have any better options anyway. And then in Game Week 31, Sheffield United at home is a great fixture. So I think my defence could have looked a lot worse had that Bournemouth fixture not gone into 28 as a double. Now I think it looks okay. It's definitely not going to do well compared to other people. But as long as the damage isn't huge, I think I'll be okay for the next few weeks. Let's have a look at the midfield. So this is where I think things start to look a little bit better for me, especially compared to anyone that's wildcarding this week. Apart from one glaring omission, and that is the fact that I don't own Mo Salah yet. But I'll talk about him and how I could bring him into my squad later on. So the midfield 4 is Palmer against Burnley at home, Bruno Fernandes against Brentford away. Yes, he is still in my squad. Son against Luton at home, and he's currently got the captain's armband. And then Saka against Man City away. Now, Saka is yellow flagged. He pulled out of the England squad during the international break, but I've got no concerns about him whatsoever. That feels like a classic international break injury. There is no way he is going to miss Man City away. Apparently, he has been carrying an injury for a long time, but obviously it can't be that bad because he's played a lot of minutes and they must be managing it. So as long as Arsenal are still in the title race, Saka's going to start every single game. On the bench, I've got Foden against Arsenal at home. Now, I do think there's a case to be made that I could play Foden. I don't think it would be instead of Fernandes. This is a bit like Game Week 28 where I played Fernandes against Everton rather than Foden against Liverpool. I think I would play Fernandes still just because of the fixture. He's on penalties, etc. But I think Foden instead of Saka is definitely... I think it's debatable, right? The reason that I'm playing Saka is penalties. That's literally it. I think Foden's at home, and obviously that's a big advantage. And he's done brilliantly, right? For a long time now. But I think without the hindsight of knowing whether there's any penalties in that match, I'm always just going to play Saka instead. I think it's like 99% certain that Foden will start, but I'm 100% certain that Saka will start, right? And then you've got the penalties on top. That's basically what's swaying it for me. I think it's quite a close decision. And I do think that Foden's ownership will be less than Saka this week. So maybe I should go for the differential. But if Arsenal go and get a penalty in that game and Saka slots it home, I don't want to miss out on that. So I think I'm going to bench Foden again. And then next week I've got a big decision about whether to sell Foden or not, and I guess we'll save that for next week's video. In terms of not having Salah, it's not ideal. I think Son captain is fine against Luton at home. It's not as good as Salah against Brighton at home. If I had Salah, I would absolutely captain him. But I think I'm prepared to take on that risk for this week, knowing that I can just get Salah in game week 31 ahead of Sheffield United at home instead. Next week, it's still probably going to cost me a -4 because I really want to get Darwin Núñez as well. But it's not a case of, we'll just do it this week and spend the 4 points now, because if I want to do it this week, it's going to cost me a -8, as I'll show you in a minute. So I think I'm going to have to go without Salah, and I'm not particularly happy about it. It'll be interesting to see how many minutes he plays, because as I said in another video this week, he didn't get past, I think it was about 76 minutes he came off against Man United in the FA Cup. That never would have happened if he was fully fit, in my opinion. But I think he looks great for Brighton at home and then Sheffield United at home. So I wish I could have him. And if I had 0.1 million more, I could do Fernandes and Foden to Salah and Sarabia. But unfortunately, I don't have that money, and therefore that move's not possible. Like, it's so close, but I just don't think that Foden's going to go up in price this week. Like, who's going to be massively bringing in Foden before Arsenal at home? It's just not going to happen. So unfortunately, that price rise for Salah has killed that move for me. And look, you could argue maybe I should have moved on that early, but I just think taking a -4 for 2 players early this game week, I think that's pushing it with international break. Like, there could have been more injuries and stuff like that. So if I could do that move, I would, because obviously Wolves in game week 34 have got Arsenal at home and Bournemouth at home. And I think eventually I'm going to bring Sarabia in anyway. And with the injuries to Hwang, the injuries to Neto, his minutes should be pretty good. And there's also a chance he's on penalties as well. I know Cunha might be back this week and he may take penalties instead, but I don't think that's necessarily a guarantee, as we discussed kind of weeks ago. So that's a move I'd love to do, but I can't afford to do it. So I've got to make a third move to fund getting Salah in. I just don't think he's worth a -8. Of course, with hindsight, it might be that Salah scores a hat-trick against Brighton and Son blanks, but I think without knowing that, of course, it's just not worth particularly worrying about. Look, Son captain against Luton could be great. Luton defence is terrible. He probably will be back on the left. I don't think he'll be through the middle. I suspect that Richarlison will play. But Richarlison might go off early and Son might get some time through the middle. And it's not like he can't get returns from the left either. So I'm going to be watching a little bit behind the sofa this week, because having Fernandes instead of Salah is not great. And obviously you've got captaincy on top of that. It could be a massive swing. But I do think game week 30 for me, pretty much for the rest of the season now, is going to be the worst one on paper, right? Because I've not got Salah. My defence doesn't look quite so good. I can't captain Salah either. If I can just get through this week without a massive red arrow, I think things look a lot better. So I'm just not willing to take a -8. Just quickly on whether to captain Cole Palmer instead. I thought James on Planet FPL, I was listening to the Sky Fantasy Football podcast, made a really good point. And that is that Palmer didn't play a single minute for England. Now, neither did Branthwaite. And I think a lot of people expected Southgate to take a look at him. And as far as we know, he doesn't have a knock. So it might have just been that other players, were due to get game time. In the first game, Foden played on the right and it was Gordon on the left. And in the second game, Foden was on the left, although he came central a lot. And Bowen got his chance on the right. And to be fair, Bowen over a long time probably deserves to get a go in the England friendlies as well. But for Palmer not to get a single minute, especially when Gordon came on in that second game, tells me there's maybe a little bit of an injury there. It might be like Saka. They just didn't want to take the risk. I just don't know right now if I'd be happy captaining him. To be honest with you, though, I think Palmer will probably be fine, and I still prefer Son. I just think with his goal threat versus Palmer, that would swing it for me. They're both on penalties, of course. But if you wanted to go Palmer, that's a good decision too. Anyway, that's my midfield. Probably not making any moves this week. Let's look at the forwards and the other routes to Salah that I have. And then up front, I've got Haaland against Arsenal at home, Watkins against Wolves at home, and then Solanke against Everton at home. Solanke in particular is someone that's really easy to hold on to now. If we look at the fixtures that Bournemouth have got, it's Everton at home, Palace at home, next 2 game weeks. Then it's Luton away in 32. the hardest fixture on paper is Man United at home in 33, but I'm sure Bournemouth will get chances in that game. And then obviously you've got the double game week of Villa away and Wolves away. So he's one of those players that's just super easy now. I just don't need to think about him at all unless he picks up an injury. So he will just be remaining in the team until game week 34, and then I will wild card him out. I've spoken a lot about Watkins this week. I think it's perfectly viable to start to look to get rid of him. I just don't particularly want to do it before Wolves at home because that's a good fixture. It's much easier to do it when he plays Man City away in game week 31. Watkins out is a way for me to get Salah, right? And that's what I'm going to do next week. I'm just not as happy about doing it this week, especially not for a -8, right? But I can do it for a -4. So if I just reset this, if I do Fernandes to Salah and then Watkins out, I've got 5.3 million to spend. So I could buy someone like Mateta, and that would leave me 0.4 million left over. Mateta would just go on the bench, ready for game week 34 when Palace have a double game week of West Ham and Newcastle at home. But taking Watkins out for a -4 just doesn't necessarily sit right for me with me. And obviously it leaves me longer without Darwin Núñez as well. And if Darwin Núñez comes through the Brighton match without getting a yellow card, I definitely want him for Sheffield United at home. So next week, right, if I do these moves and take a -4, it'll be Watkins to Darwin. I think a lot of people are going to look at this. Fernandes to Salah, of course. And then one of Foden or Son. I'll save that discussion for next week. One of Foden or Son to Sarabia. And then right away, I've got Salah and Darwin in for the double in 34 and Sheffield United at home. And then Sarabia ready for the double later on as well. And I just think that looks a lot better than doing Watkins and Fernandes to Mateta and Salah this week. It's quite close. I think one thing I've looked at quite a lot, and I would recommend doing this to anyone, especially if you're dead-ending into 34, is looking at the route for your transfers, because it's very easy for most people to get to kind of 9, 10, 11 double game week players, but it's about in which order you do it. And I know, for example, it's good for me if I can roll in game week 32, but if I do Watkins out for Mateta, let me just do this. Sorry, not to roll in. Yeah, to roll in game week 32. That's what I'm trying to say, right? I'm trying to remember what moves I'm doing. If I do the Mateta move in and Salah as well, I won't play I won't mess around with the rest of the squad. But in game week 31, right, I would just play Foden over Mateta, and I would just play a 3-5-2, and that would look perfectly fine. So I'd have Son, Palmer, Saka, Salah, Foden, and then Haaland and Solanke up front. I wouldn't need to make a move, but in game week 32, I'd have 2 free transfers, and then I'm having to sell like Son or Foden before Forest at home and Palace away just to get Sarabia in, and then I've got to play one of Sarabia or Mateta that week. Now, I might have to do that anyway, but as it stands right now, I just don't want to put myself in a position where that is absolutely my move. Like, one of Son or Foden would have to get sold in 31 anyway, so I'm not going to own them, but I'd rather have Darwin Núñez in the team rather than Mateta. So for me, that move of doing Watkins in this week just doesn't work out very well for my next few transfers. Basically, I can tell you now, I've been on that planner. And by the way, if you want to check that out, links in the description below to Fantasy Football Hub as always. I've gone through the plan loads, and I keep coming back to the fact it's much better for my long-term moves to just do the -4 next week and get Darwin, Salah, and Sarabia in one move. By the way, really quickly, Darwin is on 8 yellow cards, and he's got to get through 4 more matches without getting 2, otherwise he'll get a 2-game suspension. So if Darwin was to get a yellow against Brighton, then I wouldn't even necessarily buy him next week. So that leaves my options open as well. But either way, I just don't want to take Watkins out for a -4 this week, and I don't want to take a -8. And then Haaland. Could you make a case to captain Haaland this week? Yes, as always, because he's great, and it's Arsenal and it's a home game. But Arsenal is tough, and it's just one of those weeks where if I'm going to go against Haaland ever, this is the kind of week that I want to do it. And I'd rather captain Son rather than Haaland. That's a pretty easy decision. By the way, just quickly, just to go through every potential scenario, I could get rid of Haaland as well. Like, that is an option for my team, because outside of game week 33, there's no massive need to captain him until maybe game week 35. So obviously Haaland could go for Darwin, and Fernandes could go for Salah, because I definitely would sell Fernandes before I sell Foden. But again, having gone through the planner with this move, my next few transfers just aren't the order just doesn't work out that well. And also, it means getting rid of Haaland, right? And yes, the fixture this week is not great, Arsenal at home, but Villa at home is fine. Palace away is fine. Luton at home, I'll probably captain him, even though that's the game in between the Real Madrid Champions League matches. And then in 34, I can either keep him for Brighton away, or I can sell him to a double game week player. So my main plan is to get through to game week 34 with Darwin and Solanke with double game weeks, and then Haaland with Brighton away. And then either I play him if I've got other transfers to make, or I can change him to Cunha or Mateta or someone like that if I wanted to. But that decision doesn't have to be made until game week 34. So hopefully that all makes sense. My probable moves this week, after 2 weeks of international break and a free hit in 29, is just to roll this team. Right? I just don't see me making any moves. I'm going to captain Son. I'm going to play Fernandes instead of Salah captain that a lot of people will have, and just pray that it works out well and the damage is minimal. There we go. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. I forgot to mention in the Game Week 29 review that I'm ranked at 26k now, so I dropped from 24 to 26k. Hopefully we can stay around about there, and hopefully Game Week 31 will look even better. Rate 5 stars if you listen on podcasts as well, and I'll catch you tomorrow for final thoughts.